Moria is coming, and he's very excited for Moria. So we're gonna do.
Do you want to run Moria, or do you want me to run Moria?
I don't know. I backed the Moria book, so one way or another, we're gonna play Moria. Somebody's gonna run it. Zach, can you hear us now?
Let's do the problems with the network.
Try to. See. Still no Zach?
Zach.
Oh, This is how this is gonna go. Awesome. Hey everybody, I'm a jackwagon, and obviously John isn't here. I was saying we're gonna play D&D. We're gonna play Lord of the Rings. We're gonna play specifically Lord of the Rings 5e by Free League. This is gonna be session 0, so you're gonna watch people make characters. You're gonna watch people learn the system. You're gonna get the premise of our campaign, and then we're gonna start the campaign in earnest next time. If you make comments in chat, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm going to be super focused on the players tonight, making sure we get them through all those questions and make sure the system and the characters make sense. But there's already some cool people in chat that I see that can answer questions that might come up. But we're going to do a quick introduction of the players, just so you know who you're looking at. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown here, and then maybe next session, when they have some time and some forewarning, they can introduce themselves and their character when we actually start playing. So we can't do a live stream without having a second Zach. So Zach Francis, say hello.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? I am Zach Francis.
That's right. Awesome. Then we have Ulysses. Ulysses, how you doing?
Oh no.
Fantastic. Excited to be here for the third Lord of the Rings campaign.
That's right. That's right. Then we have Andrew.
Hello, I'm Andrew, and I will be learning from all these people words from Lord of the Rings, which I do not know, which is most.
That's right. You're gonna be learning words like Ecthelion, and I know Ulysses is excited to educate on that side of things. And then last but not least, Brian, thanks for playing.
Howdy, I'm also looking forward to playing our first Lord of the Rings game chronologically, since we're doing a time hop here. So, yeah, I'm excited to be back and get to play some 5e and Lord of the Rings. And I also have a cold today, so just ignore my voice when I sound like a teenager.
Perfect. All right, so before we get into building characters and figuring out the system, I want to set you guys off right with an idea of what the premise is of this game. So obviously you guys saw, and you guys had a little bit of say in kind of the idea of the storyline, but we're going to be playing a campaign called Servants of Ecthelion. If you're in the know, lore-wise, what you will know is that Boromir's dad is Denethor, and Denethor's dad is Ecthelion. Ecthelion he's one of the many stewards of Gondor, and he kind of comes into power right as Sauron re-announces himself to Middle Earth, and kind of reveals that he's back. And so Ecthelion has the burden of dealing with Mordor coming back and with Sauron, but he also has the burden of when his dad dies and he takes the throne, Ecthelion has to deal with the fact that Saruman basically says, "That's cool, you're not your dad, I'm taking over Orthanc." And so Orthanc used to be an outpost of Gondor. It is now in control of Saruman in these recent years. And then he's also having to deal with rumblings and foray skirmishes from the south, from Harad and Umbar. So he's got a lot on his plate, and the pitch of this campaign is that these yahoos are going to see what they can do to help Ecthelion. And I told you fellas that you all had to play a Gondorian, right?
Yes.
So there isn't Gondorians yet in the official Lord of the Rings role-playing game. So what I did was I made up a document that gives you options and basically the culture of Gondor, and then subcultures for several different types of Gondorians, and we'll cover that in a minute. But yeah, you're all going to play Gondorians. Now, what I didn't tell you, let's talk about this for a moment. So I think the pitch that I had was that you guys are going to be sent south to see if you couldn't turn a potential enemy into a potential ally with some of the individuals in the south of Gondor. I'm going to tweak that a little bit. Initially, we had pitched that you guys were going to play during the time of Denethor. Now we're playing in the time of Ecthelion. And Ecthelion, things are a little bit more unstable. Things are a little bit less sure. And so there's another player, though, when you go into the time of Ecthelion's rule. Ecthelion has the son Denethor that's helping him along, but he also has another person. Think of them in like the Boromir-Faramir role, right? So you have the Boromir, who's the heir and all that, but then you also have this other person, and this other person in the time of Ecthelion is Thorongil. Ulysses, do you know who Thorongil is?
No, not yet.
Well, I will help you here, because though your characters don't know this, I think it's important that you guys know this. So Thorongil is the name that Aragorn uses before he uses Aragorn. That is his cover name for when he's in the lands of Gondor, so that he is not seen as an heir apparent. He's just seen as a kick-ass fighter with a lot of charisma, right? And so,
well, there goes the big reveal of session 3.
That's right.
Like that, none of us knew. We would have all gone, "What? Oh my goodness,
No,
this ranger is Aragorn."
If I know anything from this group, 3 of you would have Googled it by the time this stream had ended, and would have carried that weight with you for 3 sessions.
I was gonna say, I felt like I kind of recognized the name, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah. So the idea here is that.
Hey, just pause for 1 moment.
Yeah.
Is that his name when he fights alongside Theoden?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you got it.
That clicks. That clicks a lot.
Yes. Absolutely. So he has been helping, actually, at this point in time, King Thingol from Rohan. He's been helping him deal with some stuff up there. Then he comes out south and he helps Ecthelion with all of his problems. And so Thorongil is like this very influential powerhouse figure in the realms of men at the moment, but no one knows who he is. So you guys need to know that, because whoever you decide to make in this campaign, you have been called to a meeting at Minas Tirith in the halls of the steward, in the throne room. You are going to be brought in from the different corners of Gondor, and you know who your companions are. They're not your companions yet, but they're other members of Gondorian royalty or Gondorian military or scholars or whoever they are. You know these names, and you would certainly know that Thorongil is this individual that's also coming to the meeting. And you know that this is the meeting that Ecthelion has been working on a plan to, we'll say, deal with any threats south of Gondor. He's got a big threat building with Sauron, so his goal has been, let's deal with one threat at a time. Let's knock out the small one way or another. So he is working on a plan for the south, and you all have been brought in. And one thing that you guys should know right out the gate, and then we're going to move over to building characters, is that Thorongil is brought in to these types of conversations almost exclusively for his military prowess. So the idea of bringing in Thorongil means there's probably some sort of military action that's about to take place. That does not mean that you have to build a military character. In fact, I'd encourage some of you not to, but just kind of keep in mind that that's the situation.
Would be the thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so knowing that, we have some people that some of you are fresh to the changes that this system makes to 5e. Do we want to go over that first, or do you guys want to pitch different character ideas, or how do we want to roll here?
You are in charge, my friend. I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
I'd say we could pitch the characters and then character ideas and then fit them to the system rather than trying to do it the other way around.
I
But
like.
that's just
I love that. Yeah. So, Brian, I know you're itching. Do you wanna share your character idea?
yeah. I guess it's not going to be a problem if my voice cracks over and over because of my sore throat. Because I am going to be playing a teenager, a teenage student, recently attending whatever the Gondorian equivalent of either higher level prep school or some sort of university, and attempting to learn all sorts of things about the history. Very great designs on becoming a historian or a advisor, some sort of bureaucratic role that is not as much as of a bureaucrat as my last character, I promise, but exactly as much a bureaucrat as my character before that, because I will be playing a young Zachariah. So, guys, Zachariah.
That's awesome.
It's 40 years back. He's a teenager.
I know. I freaking love that so freaking much.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
really great.
So, just to not screw up the timeline, he needs to A, not die, and B, not advance too much in his spells because he will find himself playing again in the future, aka the past.
Nice.
So,
That's awesome.
For anybody in the stream, the watching, Zachariah already played in a past campaign, Middle Earth, and played basically a character that is an old man who has only gained whatever levels and experience by casting spells from the halls of Minas Tirith out, being artillery basically, who has absolutely no interest in going on a quest. Why would I go to Autumno? That's absurd. And ends up getting basically voluntold by Aragorn that he has to go along, and ended up enjoying crawling through the halls of Autumno, this ancient fortress from the first age. I think. Basically found himself every time he was out there going, "Oh, I want to go home, but while we're here, let's learn more about this. Wow, we've achieved enough? We can go home, right? But while we're here, isn't it really interesting that the elves are doing this and that they're being turned into that?" So yeah, so I'm excited to play that character again as a young man instead of an old man.
Nice.
Two shout outs to Zachariah. One, in the Autumno Awakens campaign, you played him as a linguist, which is a class crafted by our glorious DM himself.
Indeed.
Which was a very cool class. You played it with aplomb. And for the chat audience, Brian conjured a demon with whom he became like, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy. Like, they became this inseparable duo. And I actually think you took over residence in Autumno with the demon.
At the end of the campaign, at the end of the campaign, I had just used the summon demon spell, and then I summoned him again, and I promised him that he would get to rule and take over and help me, and that I was totally going to stay there with him. And everyone knew that the only thing that Zachariah ever wanted to do was get the hell out of this dungeon. And so at the very end, when everybody's deciding, oh, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? My character said, actually, I'm going to stay here because, and it wasn't a demon in game. It wasn't a demon. It was reflavored. It was a Balrog. And so I ended up, because the Balrogs were corrupted Maiar, I believe. Am I correct in that, Zach?
Yeah.
I decided that my new goal for the remainder of my lifetime would be to help this Balrog and another corrupted Maiar, and basically help them be redeemed, be rejuvenated, and become helpful, good Maiar again. And yeah, that was where the campaign ended, was me staying there and when we thought this campaign was going to go further in the future, then I was actually planning on playing that Balrog again and playing him as a wizard or a sorcerer. So yeah, that was going to be fun.
Nice.
But we went this direction, so I get to, oddly enough, decided to play the younger version of this character.
Nice. All right, so we're earmarking a scholarly sort of fellow, Zacharias, younger.
Zachariah.
Zachariah.
Also, I have to point out that the reason I named him Zachariah was because we had 3 Zachs playing, and I just really wanted the fun of being a 4th Zach.
Yes.
I just felt left out not being Zach, so I had to play a character named Zachariah.
That's right. That's right. Cool. Awesome. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Can I go last because I know least about this? And
Sure,
I'd like
absolutely.
to-
No worries. Well, Ulysses, you have anything on your mind then?
Oh, I do. It was funny. I was going to let Andrew go because he is new to the Lord of the Rings campaign sequence, but I'll let Zach Francis because there's only his knowledge and his love of this canon deserves the respect of going next.
Okay.
To be fair, I don't know if Zach Francis knows what he's playing yet.
Well, I mean,
If you have a character concept,
I do have a character. I would like to say that it is going to be very much based off of Faramir. I think not based off of Faramir because I'm not going to copy that, but I got Faramir's sword to go with Boromir's sword, so I have my Gondorian wall back here, and so it's very fitting that we're playing Gondor because I've been like Gondorians because that's what I've been really into right now. So just going through what you sent over, I really like the idea of a word weaver. So I think I'm going to do that as the background. And I think I'm going to do I kind of want to do a ranger of Ecthelion.
Nice.
So just looking at those 2 things, those are the 2 things that stuck out to me. And then I really liked the what was it? Strength of will with the charisma you gain upon. Yeah, strength of will. I think it was strength of will. That's the one that had the charisma. Yeah, that's the one I think that I liked a lot.
Okay.
So those are the 3 out of the things that you sent, the virtues, backgrounds, and right. That's the stuff that we had to look at.
Yeah. So absolutely. So really, so let's just kind of go over that document real quick for you guys, just so you know what you're looking at. So since this is a document that I threw together, please, there might be issues or you might have confusion. Please just yell at me, and we'll try to rectify them. But yeah, so you're all playing in D&D terms. You're all playing the same race, same culture, which is a man of Gondor, and then you're picking a subculture. And you're saying you're looking at. Let's scroll down here. You're looking at the Rangers of Ecthelion as your kind of core character concept, right? You're gonna be a representative, maybe not the only representative because people don't have to all play the same, play different things, but you're gonna be one of the representatives of Ecthelion, Ranger. And then you said, as far as backgrounds, you're looking at which one did you say?
I really liked the word weaver.
Okay, yep, obviously, yep, cool, that's fantastic. And then so that's like obviously just like your background in D&D. They're a little less robust typically, but similar. And then virtues are going to be something that you're going to be picking up not just at the beginning, but as you level up your character. They're kind of like feats in 5e. So when you pick a virtue, virtues are specific to your culture. Now, there's also general virtues, which are in the core book, but I wanted to give you guys a fun selection of virtues that, maybe I borrowed a little bit from some of the published races or published virtues, but basically give you guys some ideas for how you could pick those. And typically, Zach, something that you could think about when you look at your virtues is typically you grab a virtue based off of a core concept of your character's identity, right? It definitely is like a feat in that it has, a few
Are these
priority points, but
Are these the kind of things like in Dune we kind of like made up our own, and if it fit, then it works, or are we picking out individual ones from here?
So you will pick a virtue that is either here or from the general list, which is in the book, and we can talk about that in a moment. But you will pick an actual virtue because these have actual mechanics tied to them.
Gotcha.
And that's why there's so many of them in this doc and in the general, because the expectation is now, if you have an idea for one, especially when we level and you have an option to build a new one, if you like, none of these work, but I have this idea for one, that's a great conversation for us to have.
Perfect.
So, but I love the idea that you're going to do a Word Weaver Ranger. That at least as an initial character concept, that's different and cool. So, definitely digging that. Okay, so, so let's see here. Ulysses, you want to go now?
Yes. One confirmation, Brian, Zachariah is going to be a scholar, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So scholar, and then I looked through the different things. There were two that just made the most sense. It was in a different document there. It's downloaded role playing character. Nope, not the character sheet. In any case, yeah, I picked out a couple of the features and the background that made the most sense there. I don't remember what those were exactly, but they were pretty straightforward.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I had come with kind of, parallel tracks, whether it was going to be scholar or captain. But I think what I'm gravitating towards is playing a prince of Belfalis.
Ooh.
Okay. And if
Okay.
you scroll that up, right, for the people on chat, these are, princes, Gondorian princes, very proud of their Numenorian ancestry, building tall towers, breeding powerful horses, sailing a fleet of masterwork vessels. I mean, this is, to me, like the purest blood of the line left in the kingdom. And I thought that you have a virtue called remembered royalty, which I thought was perfectly tailored for a captain, perfectly tailored for someone who in the heat of battle would be able to conjure up that kind of warlord inspiration. Your kin belong to the bloodline of kings, appealing to your kindred's noble bearing, cast aside doubts. And I love the fact that when you bring this power and it's like short rest or long rest renewal, everyone gets advantage on attack rolls and charisma intimidation checks, and they're immune to being frightened, and there's temporary hit points. So I just feel like it was such a powerful rallying call. And I think, and a little shout out to Chaos 8, because he thought that it was going to be something very bardy and lore driven. And anyone who played these campaigns in the past knows how true that could be. But I was thinking in terms of background, it's hard to be a Prince of Belfalis and not have Keeper of the Lore. I think that it goes with the very essence of feeling that your Numenorian blood still courses through your arteries and veins, and that you are, this remembered royalty, and you have a very fixed sense of Gondor's place as the true heirs of what has been great about humans in this world.
Awesome. Yeah. If I had myself together, this would be where I pulled a Ulysses and I pulled out my copy of Return of the King and flipped to the section on there's that section where all the different princes and peoples are coming into prepping for the siege of Minas Tirith, and the princes of Belfalis come in, and the idea there, I think, like the commentary that is made is like, in them is like the truest understanding or the truest representation of the Numenorians of old. Like they just carry that weight of nobility and valiance of spirit that has largely been lost in Gondor at this time. So yeah, absolutely, I liked all that together.
And kudos to you for like the way you wrote that, like that the Prince Belfalis description, because they're either like, I think you're either someone really good with ships and that type of vessel navigation, or you're really good with horses. And a huge kudo to, like Tolkien goes so deep. If you go back to Greek myth, it's Poseidon, the god of the sea, who is the god of horses, because horses are like this emanation out of the roar of the waves, the cresting of waves. And so that adjacency of horsemanship with being great navigators and sailors just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks for the appreciation. These were a lot of fun to make. Okay, so Ulysses is angling that way, that concept. Right, we're gonna bounce back to Andrew now. Andrew, you have some ideas?
Yeah, I was looking more because I'm not as well versed in the lore of things. I was thinking of a mix of something between a warden, a messenger, and a treasure hunter. I don't want to be a straight up kind of rogue, more sort of more of a mix. And when I was looking at the document you have up there, what was the very first one?
Lords of Lasarnak.
Yeah, so I was thinking of a character that maybe they're in this more sort of peaceful area, but kind of gravitate away from that, wanting to do more and sort of go into the wilds and kind of patrol the more dangerous areas kind of on their own. So maybe somebody who starts in this kind of what sounds like a pretty idyllic area, but then kind of has moved away from that and has kind of gone away from their calling. And maybe, again, if it's somebody from like a noble family, maybe they're not really interested in that when they see that there's greater darkness on the borders of the world, and they're more interested in protecting people from that than they are in running the family orchard or whatnot.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that happens around this time, Andrew, is that basically Gondor starts to become less of a, oh, there's all these other kingdoms. There's always that. But an enormous amount of Gondorians start shifting as Sauron's revealed and all these threats are revealed. They start shifting towards Minas Tirith. They start shifting towards Osgiliath. They start shifting towards Ecthelion. Basically, recognizing there's a job to do. There's an enemy to engage with. There's something to protect. They start to shift. And by the time you get to Return of the King, almost all of Gondorians live in and around Minas Tirith. And it's just a few outliers out here. So it makes perfect sense that you're playing someone from Lasarnak, but that you feel that's largely peaceful at this time. But you're one of maybe some of the early ones that are drawn towards this growing conflict. So that's very cool.
Yeah, and so mechanically, those who've played with me before, if you've played anything 5th edition with me before, you'll know that out of the 80 or so characters I have in 5th edition D&D, I have exactly one character who is single class. So I'll probably find a way to multi-class in this. So
yeah, where there's a will. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we have some rough ideas about what our party is going to look like. So let's talk a little bit now about the differences in this, because this is not 5e standard. And so as we take those character concepts and figure out how to communicate them in the game, that's going to be useful. So let's take a look here. So first and foremost, we've already kind of covered it, but they call them cultures instead of classes. And they're about the same level of importance as a class or as a race in D&D.
callings.
And then you've got callings. Yes, callings. Thank you. callings are a 1-to-1 with classes in D&D, but callings only go up to 10th level and do not have any spells. None of the classes or the callings have any spells whatsoever. They do draw upon class features from classes that you're going to be familiar with in D&D. You're going to see a lot of suggestions of ranger, fighter, and rogue especially. But you're going to see some rumblings of bard and whatnot. But it's all kind of mixed together and has a lot more, less high fantasy epic flavor and more of a subdued tone on a lot of it. So the callings that you can be a part of are captain, champion, messenger, scholar, treasure hunter, and warden. And without getting into all of them, captains are going to be kind of like a fighter, but like a charismatic fighter that's going to have some abilities to rally troops and be supportive. And so they're not going to be the truest of the martial classes, but close, very close to that as a concept. Captains. Champions are going to be like your hardcore fighters. So that's where you're going to get all of your fighting abilities. They're the people that are going to get extra attack first, yada yada yada. That's going to be the champion. The messenger is where we start to get a little bit weird and funky. A messenger is kind of like a rogue, but like a rogue that focuses on having a way with words and with communicating. So like maybe like the mastermind rogue or something like that from 5e. So you're going to get sneak attack, but not as fast as some of the other classes get sneak attack. But the messenger is really fun to play. There's also some cool features in there, like a messenger is harder to hit in combat because the assumption is that for most people, most of the peoples of Middle Earth, they aren't, the idea of don't shoot the messenger actually applies. And so you will be the last to fall in a lot of Middle Earth situations. And in fact, you might be taken captive instead of being targeted. So messenger is the third. The fourth is scholar. Scholar is badass. I love the scholar in this game because it's like a bard, but without spells, which is kind of what I think a bard should be. So scholar's rad. You're going to love it if you play a scholar. The other thing that's cool about a scholar is that scholars have crafts, and crafts are super, super big in Lord of the Rings. The idea of a craft is like, think about like Theoden talking about witchcraft, right? Or Gandalf, as he's like whispering to moths, is doing beastcraft, right? This idea is not about like making things with your hands, but about having such a high level of skill in something that you can do things that are beyond impressive by other people. So scholars have access to more craft than others, and so you're going to be able to manipulate some of the like speechcraft or witchcraft or beastcraft. You're going to have access to more of that than the other classes, though the other classes do get a little bit. And treasure hunter is your rogue. It's your sneaky rogue. It's Bilbo Baggins, right? You're going to get sneak attack early on. It's pretty straightforward, and we'll cover that if we need to, but treasure hunters are your rogue. And then warden is funky. Warden is like your protector, guardian, overseer, kind of a ranger, like all those things combined, closest to a ranger that you have. So warden's going to be really cool if you don't want to be strictly martial, but you also don't want to be a captain and kind of the leader. Then a warden might give you enough martial to feel great in fights, but also some fun flavor, especially during like travel and journeys and wilderness exploration, things like that. So those are your 6 callings that you have to choose from. I know some of you guys have already talked about callings. Before we dive deep into that, let's cover a few other things that are going to be very, very different. There's new skills in this game. So the new skill list is going to get rid of things like arcane or arcana, and it also gets rid of, I believe, the history skill and expands it. Let me double check that.
Yep.
So you
and religion.
And religion, yep. So instead you have, instead of history, you have a skill called Old Lore, and a new skill called Riddle. So riddle isn't necessarily just your ability to solve riddles, because that's kind of niche. It's also your ability to, like, communicate in a roundabout way. Think about like when, like Bilbo does that a lot, right? Where he answers things without answering them, or giving people just enough. Gandalf sometimes does that too, right? When when the dwarves ask Bilbo, "How'd you get past the Goblin guards?" Right? And Bilbo's like, "Oh, Art of Burglane, whatever," right? And Gandalf says, your story rings true," right? That's
Yeah.
that's that roundabout way of answering. It's being clever. It's also about finding clever ways out of situations or into situations. So riddle is covers a lot of ground there. The survival skill has also been replaced with 3. That's to communicate. That travel and journey is super important in this game, and we're going to find that out probably in the next session. So the survival skill has been replaced with explore, hunting, and travel. Explore is going to be when you're off the beaten path and wandering or maneuvering through the wilderness. Explore is how you're going to navigate the place with no trails. Travel is the exact opposite. It's how quickly can you traverse the roads and the paths of this world. How easily can you navigate the people that are on those roads and understand who's a threat and who's not a threat before it comes to a face-to-face encounter. That sort of a thing. And then hunting is 100% what you think it is. It's about hunting game, and that's big because you're traveling long distances in Middle-earth, and you can't pack for everything. You don't have Lembas bread, you're Gondorian, so it's important that you are able to acquire your own food. Do we have any questions about new skills as players?
Assignment of skills? Do we just you either are proficient or not proficient based on on picking how many at character creation?
Yep, your calling, and your calling is gonna give you an option of skills that you can pick from to be proficient in, just like classes give that in D&D. So absolutely 100%. Okay. Okay, so other rules that are important. Resting. This is huge. So let's keep this in mind. Short rests require 8 hours of sleep. So keep in mind that if you have abilities and you're like, oh, these are cool abilities, but they say short rest or long rest, a short rest is 8 hours. A long rest can only be done in a safe haven, and that's going to be rare, few and far between for this campaign. So just keeping in mind that you got to re-communicate, retranslate your abilities recharge rate, because resting is different. And then last but not least, last 2 little things. We already talked about virtues, which are things like feats that you get at certain levels. You also get rewards, and rewards are magical items that you either acquire or uncover or kind of manifest during the game. So think about Sting with Bilbo. We're just going to go back to Bilbo this whole evening, right? So I would maintain that Sting is not magical until Bilbo picks it up and deals with spiders, right? It may be able to glow blue, but it doesn't have the aura, the atmosphere, the weight of Sting until it is put toe-to-toe with a significant threat. Before that, it's just a letter opener. The same thing is true here in this game, where rewards can be a weapon that you had already on your sheet, but when you get that to the point where you get to unlock a reward, you can make your weapon named and have a benefit to it, like a magical weapon. You could also find weapons or find gear, and you could determine that that's your reward, or you could determine that you were able to be gifted a reward or assigned a reward when you're in a city or whatnot. So rewards are magical special gear that you'll get guaranteed throughout the course of play. You shouldn't, however, expect really any magical rewards aside from that. If you do, it's going to be few and far between, right? So, just as a note, rewards and virtues are a core part of your character's progression, and so you get guaranteed magic stuff throughout this game. Last but not least, Shadow and Corruption. We're not going to cover this heavy, but basically the idea is that as you adventure, you're going to be gaining points of... You're going to be contesting against the shadow, the darkness, the enemy. And when you do that, you're going to be potentially taking on points of corruption. Every calling has a tied-in corruption that's just a flavor guide for you, but falling into corruption is not just flavor. If you fall far enough into corruption, if you gain enough corruption points, you can become anguished, which is a new condition. We'll talk about it if we get to it, and even miserable. And go too far down the corruption path, and your character can become unplayable. So it's highly unlikely in a Middle Earth story that your character dies outright. It can happen. It certainly could happen. But what's more likely to happen is that you fall into corruption, I can't use Bilbo here necessarily, so I'll say like Boromir, right? Like that sort of thing, or Denethor, or Saruman, or Gollum, or whatever, right? Like, or Frodo at the end, right? Like these are characters that built up enough corruption that they eventually fell. If that happens to you, your character becomes unplayable. So we'll make sure that that doesn't happen. No promises though. Any questions about resting, rewards and virtues, or shadow and corruption at the moment? Nope. Cool. Awesome. All right. So knowing that, Zach Francis, let's bounce back to you for a moment here.
Okay.
So you were looking at playing a ranger. Do you have an idea for what calling you might want to do at this point?
Calling. Let me pull that back up here. Hold on. Where did that go? Hold on, I'm trying to find them all again. I had to reset this thing and I lost all my pages.
You're good. No
Which
rush.
one is it under?
So it's the one under the bigger book. It's in the bigger book. It starts on page 44. That's the captain, the champion, messenger, scholar, treasure hunter, warden.
All right, let me load this back up here. You said page 44.
Uh-huh.
All right, hold on. I don't know why it like froze on me and I had to reset all this stuff.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. Callings, yes, here we go. I liked Messenger. Because it goes with I liked Captain and Messenger. Those are the two that I was looking at that went with the ideas that I had.
Yeah.
I think Messenger fits what I'm looking to do more. So I'm going to say Messenger.
So we're going to be making level 3 characters. I don't need you to build your character tonight necessarily. I mean, you're welcome to, but mainly it's about fleshing out concepts, right, and all that. So Messenger, at 3rd level, you're going to pick a Messenger path. So this is like your subclass or your archetype in D&D, right? So the Messenger has 2 path options. You can either play as a counselor, which is that's someone obviously who brings advice to those who need it, right? So that could very well work within this campaign. The other option is to play a herald. You believe that advice alone cannot stop the enemy. To withstand such reckless hate, you need both wise words and strength to back them. So you kind of got counselor's going to be less combat-y, and herald's going to be a little bit more so.
I probably would do Herald, I think.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I really do like that. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
The flavor's strong with the idea of a ranger of Ecthelion who's a word weaver, herald, right? Because you are on literally the battle line, right?
Yeah.
You are where the enemy must push through first, whether they're coming from Mordor or up through Umbar and southern Gondor, right? So being this person who is there to communicate the power, threat, and prominence of Gondor to the people who first set foot into it is important. So that's very cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Awesome. Sweet. So we'll hold on to that. So what things that you need to be thinking of as far as this goes now are you're going to get a craft or a virtue, just for being cool, being awesome, and being a messenger. That's a second level feature, but you get to pick between either a craft or a virtue. Crafts are at the end of the callings in that same chapter, and virtues are in the chapter after that. You're also going to get an additional virtue that you need to pick from the list in the Gondor document. So you'll get a virtue for Gondor, just in general,
And then one of these.
and then either another virtue or a craft. And that second virtue could be another Gondor virtue, or it could be a general, or you could pick a craft. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. We'll bounce back and see if you have any questions, but I think that gives you some stuff to noodle with. Ulysses, or you know what? Let's hold up. Brian, I know you already had a vision, so this one would probably be pretty straightforward. You were thinking scholar, right?
Yeah. So I'm going scholar. I haven't figured out. I haven't looked carefully at the craft. That's the next thing to look at. But I know for the not background, whatever the first thing is, cultural trait. Subculture, I'd like to go for Men of the White City. In fact, I feel like I probably haven't left Minas Tirith very often at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, higher intelligence and familiarity with the traditions of court and nobility, proficiency in one skill. So probably Old War. So I've got that. The next one is picking out that background though. And Michael T, I have an idea. Ulysses, I've got an idea for you. And of course, there's no problem if we both have the same background. But I was thinking that given my character, what he wants to do, history of your people is long and often obscure and recorded only in the vaults of the greatest cities away from the eyes of most of your kin. You have taken on the responsibility of telling tales of lost Numenor at whoever you meet to spread the memory of the bitter struggle to your folk. As somebody who is lore keeper, all about the history, the nerdy details and archiving them, that seems like the best fit for me. We could both go for that if you want, but I was also looking at perhaps you might be interested in eloquent orator. The hardships you've endured have inspired numerous songs, but the words that come easier to your lips are those recounting the feats of great cunning. I know it's eloquent, but not about those details. But if my idea is I want to keep the lore, and it seems like your idea is the lore is great. Hey, check it all out. Let's tell everybody about it. So that was my idea, was that might be a fit if we didn't want to both go for the same background. But at the end of the day, mechanically, there's things to choose for either of them, and we could both be keepers of lore if need be. But I know from having played a Purple Dragon Knight alongside your eloquence bard, that picking the only charisma-based fighter when you've got somebody who just wins at talking about everything. I don't want to double up with Ulysses again.
No. That's a very fair point, and I'm happy to have you be the keeper of lore.
Okay. I thought that might fit nicely there. So, and then so I appreciate that. I think that'd fit well. And then finally, I haven't figured out. I haven't looked closely whether I get a craft and a virtue or just a craft. But if I have a virtue to pick, then I think I would pick heir to a wider kingdom, which is the days of your folk have darkened and not any of you remain, but the memory of kings is passed down from generation to generation. An artifact going back to the days of the last kings has been in your family's possession for unbroken generations. Now you have been deemed worthy to be its keeper. And my thought for that artifact is not a sword or bow, but a book of, whether a book of history or a book of knowledge that would, grant wisdom, grant the ability to persuade, something to that effect, where mechanical benefit that is more intangible rather than just, oh look, he's got the sword of the kings, isn't that lovely? It's the book of the lore keepers that my grandpa had, and of course everybody knew that I'd be a lore keeper because that's of course what I do. So, so that would be my thought on that, and work with you to craft.
Absolutely.
Item.
So one of the cool things about having a wondrous item in this game, so you can either have so this heir to a wider kingdom gives you either an artifact that can either be a famous weapon or a wondrous item, and a wondrous item is going to do exactly what you're talking about there, Brian. It's going to give you we could go over this off stream later, but basically you could craft a wondrous item, and the idea is that it's going to give you 2 blessings as a wondrous item, and each one of those is going to basically give you an extra die on specific types of tests, right?
Okay.
So the fast answer is yes, it could definitely be a book. That's cool, like a tome of some sort, something that isn't just your standard book from the libraries of Minas Tirith, but something that has deeper lore, deeper understandings of the world, forgotten understandings. And we could cover that, but you're basically going to get to pick 2. And in fact, there's a suggestion for under blessings that if you wanted to have it be for old lore, that you would have it be a book as a wondrous item. So I think
Yes.
you're on brand for that being perfect.
I think style-wise, oh man, my voice. I think style-wise, the best bet might be, if it was a book about the history, a book of history from which I can gain wisdom. Well, just like this person did that thing.
Yes.
I think in this case,
Yes.
I should do this. So that would be the mechanical way that it would be
I love that.
wisdom, but not, oh, look, it's magic. It's
Yes.
just,
100%. I love that.
I'm thinking like I'm thinking of like an ancient, not ancient, oral-based African tribe with, the person who learns the song and keeps the history alive, sort of thing. But an actual book.
Nice. Okay. So yeah. So just as a note, you're gonna get that, but then you get a virtue because you're a Gondorian, so you'll pick from the list of Gondorian virtues in the special doc. And then because you're a scholar and we're starting at 2nd level, you'll have 2 craft slots, which means you get to pick 2 different types of craft to check from. So 1 virtue, 2 crafts for you.
I'll look those over.
Cool. Ulysses, what are we thinking?
I think Captain. I think Captain, and I think you tell me different, but I was going to go with Thane. I kind of like Bright Blade as a capability.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Do you think it makes more sense for Prince of Bephalis to be a chieftain or a Thane?
So a chieftain is someone who like leads a people, and a Thane is someone who has pledged themselves to a king or to a whatever, right?
Yeah.
So honestly, I think either one would work. As a Prince of Belfalis, you could be, we would just reflavor the word chieftain to be prince, right?
Yeah.
Or Thane is probably not one of the princes, or one of the princes, but someone who has forsaken or surrendered any holdings or whatever estates that they have in Belfalis, and instead committed to, the greater good of Gondor.
Yep.
So you're thinking Thane, though. That's cool.
Yeah, I just feel like this idea of being a protector, well, look, I think given the princes of Belfalis having that Númenórean bloodline really, on top of mind, I think having royalty remembered, this idea of a loyalty to the idea of a king, right? Because the stewards are acting in an expectation, right? They're waiting for the return of the king.
Yeah.
Right. At least I presume Ecthelion is, right? Denethor obviously gets corrupted and gives up on waiting for the king and refuses the king when it becomes apparent who the king is. But I think Ecthelion is in a world where he very much is continuing a tradition. And I think that if I imagine the politics of Gondor in this time period you're setting it in, it's very important that the return of the king still be a palpable political reality.
Yeah.
So I would feel that a Thane would have an allegiance to Ecthelion, but not as a substitute for the king, right? Yeah, the real allegiance is to the absence that sits upon the throne. Does that make sense?
Yep. I love that.
So, question for you in terms of background. Brian made the recommendation of eloquent orator. I think that does fit in keeping with a captain. But what do you think about Skywatcher?
So Skywatcher, when aboard a ship, you study the skies and predict the weather. With much practice, you become adept at this and can detect a storm brewing hundreds of miles away. Now, when you're at home in a port or a bay, you notice strange movements in the air coming from the east, where lies Mordor, the land of shadows. Yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. And it's cool in a lot of ways. I think that's a great choice. The other thing that I was going to suggest, I love Brian's suggestion. I love this suggestion. The other thing that I was going to say is, background's an opportunity to deviate from the norm of this location, right? You got Prince of Belfast, and you're a captain, but maybe there's a part of you that came before that, or that is a side note to that. So some of these don't make sense as much, like bitter exile. Like I don't really see that as being tied to your character concept, right? But looking through here and saying, the healing hands could give you just that little bit of something that's a little bit different. That makes your captain kind of in the same vein as Aragorn later, right? Where, so I think any of those are great.
And to be clear, Brian, you did not go the route of the healer, correct?
As a scholar,
I'm probably gonna go that direction, unless you would prefer. I just told you to change something. You can take me out of healer, but I was going to, as a craft, go for leechcraft and do the healing thing. But
you are going to do the healing.
I was, yeah. So
okay, it's fine. Yep.
Since I feel like weapons, I've got to do something, and weapons aren't my thing. So.
I love the Skywatcher, Ulysses. I think that's a great choice.
Yeah. I just feel it fits. I feel it fits with. The only other thing I was thinking about is Watcher on the border, but I don't know if Andrew or Zach are going to end up with that. I think if Andrew is nodding his head, he wants to be Watcher on the border. I'm going to let him have that, and I'll probably go with Skywatcher.
Perfect. And these are things that as we finalize things and if people post their character sheets, if you guys want to make tweaks, that's perfectly fine. Cool. I like that. I did it.
And hey, and one last thing on Skywatcher. As you remember from our One Ring campaign, in Eriador, there was an enormous weight given to astronomy, right? Like astronomy almost had, I feel, the role of religion in the Northern Kingdom. And I don't necessarily think that's something that Eriador developed in isolation. I think that's very much a Númenórean legacy. And I would have to imagine that it's present in Gondor as well. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the thing that Eriador doesn't have that Gondor has. So I think the stars are this huge thing, right? Like that, they get that from the elves, right? But I think something that Southern Gondor has, that Northern Gondor doesn't, which I think makes Skywatcher even more cool, is that it's not, they don't just have the heavens, they also have the sea. And there's a lot of understanding that comes from that too. So, and who better to know about both of those things than the princes? So, makes a lot of sense.
Okay,
cool.
All right. Anything else for us?
No, I was going to say, real quick, you need to pick. You'll get a virtue right out the gate for your class, or for your for being a Gondorian. Then you'll get another craft or virtue for being a captain. So one virtue and then another virtue or a craft.
Okay. So royalty remembered qualifies as that first virtue. and then I have to make a second choice of a craft or a virtue.
That's right. And you could go look at the general virtues in the book if you want to pick from there instead. Yep.
Got it.
Cool.
Great.
Awesome. Andrew, so let's start here. What? Because I want to make sure I'm getting all this information written down. What calling are you eyeing? I know you're multi-classing, but what are you going to start with?
I'm going to start with Warden, and we'll see if I multi-class.
Sure. I love it.
We'll decide later. So it'll be a Lord of Lasar Nak.
Yep.
Sorry, my voice is not doing great today.
You're good.
So Warden, and yeah, I'm gonna take Watcher in the Border as the background because that kind of made sense with the character concept that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be a character that kind of lives on the fringes and, like I said, comes from a noble family probably, but shuns them rather than is shunned by them, I think, in my case.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and I think sorry, what else did I have to pick?
So you're gonna get, just like Ulysses, you're gonna get one virtue from the thing there, which you just talked about. Then you're gonna get a second virtue or a craft that you'll end up choosing.
The first virtue comes from what?
From being a man of Gondor. So,
okay.
So you have to pick from that first virtue. It has to be a virtue specifically tied to being a Gondorian. The second virtue that you pick can either come from that list or it can come from the general list in the book.
I would like to take the Gleam of Wrath virtue.
I knew you were going to take that. That had you as Andrew and you as your character all over it.
It kind of makes sense. Because if I'm fighting the darkness on my own on the border somewhere, that I probably have a blade that glows.
As a little nod, that virtue, I think, is reflavored from an elven virtue. So it has that attitude of like, and I think kind of what I thought there is like the elves have that in excess, right? The idea of, so the flavor there is your folk have seen many defeats and many fruitless victories in their wars against the shadow. The elves have seen that for thousands of years, but Gondorians have that like in concentrated doses, and especially right now. So I think that makes perfect sense. That's very cool.
So I'll figure out where the blade came from.
Nice. Absolutely. And then my question for you is going to be, now you might choose to multi-class and this might not matter, but a warden must pledge an oath at 3rd level. And they're either going to be a warrior or a hunter. So a hunter is someone who has basically sworn to a type of enemy. So it's like a favored enemy in Rangers, right? And a warrior is one who is like a patroller of the landscape, kind of using guerrilla tactics to ambush enemies. So just kind of think about whether you want to align as a hunter with kind of a sworn hated enemy, or you want to go with the more I'm someone who patrols the landscape and, you know, pounces on people like Faramir is doing in Ecthelion.
Yeah. I think it's probably going to be hunter, but I'm still kind of figuring it out. And I figure if I go hunter, we'll avoid that issue of having to figure out how multiple classes having sneak attack works.
Yeah, well, I will say, if you do pick that, chat with me, and I'll make sure that you aren't picking a favorite enemy, so to speak, that is going to suck for this whole campaign. So I don't want you to pick something that we have no chance of fighting or encountering. So,
well,
polar bears
for hunter, I don't think
it's not truly that way, right? Because
it's not dependent on your. But I think for warden in general, you have to pick terrain. I think, and you have to pick.
Yeah, so I'll make sure whatever you pick there, I'll do a once over, and I won't say, oh, for sure you're gonna get a ton of use out of that, but I will tell you if it's like you're not gonna get that's not going to happen at all. So
Yeah.
you don't have a sucky build there.
Yeah.
Cool. So it looks like, just to kind of round it out, Brian is going to play a scholar from the White City. Ulysses is going to play a captain who is a thane of the princes of Dol Amroth or Belfalis. Zach, you're going to play a messenger herald, ranger of Ecthelion. And Andrew is looking at a warden, lord of Lasarnak. That's great. I think that's a nice spread that we can be happy with. So we don't have a treasure hunter and we don't have a champion, but I think we've got all the bases. Yeah, you're all champions. And the real treasure is the friendship we made along the way, so we don't have to hunt.
That's right.
Okay, so I think with that, we have enough. What I would love to do, we have about 30 minutes before I thought we'd probably wrap up this evening. What I'd love to do is give you guys a little tease, little step into the story. Now that you kind of know who your characters are, we can kind of set the scene and show you a couple things, and then you can go off and define those characters more thoroughly. So let me see if I could do this real quick. Stand by. There we go.
I love that art, though.
Yeah, right? I mean, like, all credit to whoever it was online, because I didn't make any of this. But there's a lot of killer art. So I'm going to try, just for people watching at home, I'm going to try my darndest to share screen when it's important, but we're going to be in Roll20, and mainly all we're going to be doing in there is looking at handouts and looking at dice rolls. So just keep that in mind as we dive in. So, we kind of already set the stage a little bit in that you are entering Minas Tirith. Brian, your character is already here, present, but you got a summons, and on the summons, it isn't just a, hey, Ecthelion is calling you to the throne room. This is a summons that is more formal in its address, and it doesn't go into detail, but this isn't also a surprise either. This is a formal summons that's kind of the pinnacle of a discussion, a council that you all have been participants in over the course of some months. This is a conversation that all of the lords and people of note in Gondor have been discussing, which is, how do we deal with the South? How do we deal with the East? And sometimes, how do we deal with the North, right? There's problems all over. You all had been tasked, as we said at the beginning, with being a part of the committee to determine or to kind of give thoughts or give advice, give reports on the South. And so, Brian, your character's probably spent this time, knowing that the South is a discussion point, has probably spent this time in the libraries of Minas Tirith, looking through old documents to see, understand the relationship between the Corsairs, as they're called now, and the Númenóreans of old. What you're going to know, and we can define this a little bit further once we get into actual roleplay. But what you are going to know is that, in a nutshell, some generations back, some of the Númenóreans tried to usurp the throne in Gondor, and it did not go well. And what ended up happening was those Gondorians were ostracized and ended up fleeing to the south, and they set up camp in the location called Umbar, in this haven, the city that's down there. In fact, that's the first city that the Númenóreans kind of landed in when they came to take the fight to Sauron some time back. So, say all that to say, you know that there are connections, but we'll obviously let you roll for more of understanding of those connections before, but you kind of know that these are your distant cousins down there. Zach Francis, you've made arguably one of the, you know, maybe not the longest of journeys, but certainly the most perilous, because you've had to remove yourself from Ecthelion, right? And you probably weren't on the edges of Ecthelion; you were probably deep within. And so, you've been gathering information from the front, so to speak, and kind of getting a sense for the beginnings of rumblings and movements from the south. You know, there's this big I'll flip it for people watching the stream, but you guys get to see this in a minute. But you get there's this land to the south of Gondor called South Gondor or Harondor, and you guys have had to be kind of like, you don't have enough forces to kind of hold that, but maybe you've been like poking your nose down there into like the recently lost southern regions, right? So that would probably be you.
Those are recently lost to the Corsairs, to the...
Just all sorts of chaos, right? You got the Haradrim that are kind of make forays and things like that. You've got the Corsairs that kind of push up. It's a contested land. It's really, it's not fair to say that anyone owns it at this point, and it's kind of a no man's land of like light forest, the beginnings of desert, some hills, but really there's nothing there of incredible value, and so everybody kind of like moves their troops through there, but it's not heavily occupied at any one given time. And so that's you, Zach, kind of coming back from that front with some wisdom, maybe to impart into the council. Ulysses, you're coming from the Bay of Belfast, and your people are the shipwrights, and your most dangerous enemy is the Corsairs, right? That's the problem. You know that they have a massive fleet down there that is going to be an issue for you. If it ever decides to sail up, like, not only is Belfast in trouble, but every city along the coast is in trouble. And you know that you all have your own fleet, but you are concerned that your fleet is probably not up to snuff with their fleet even now. And it seems like the reports are that the Corsairs fleet grows every month, every season. So you're probably coming here as a representative of the Navy of Gondor, with this to weigh in on naval possibilities in general, if that makes sense.
Just setting the scene, Zach. So are we talking the Corsairs? Are they the pirate monologue or analog, or are they the Scythian raider, Genghis Khan sort of analog?
Yeah. So definitely the Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings pitches them as pirate sorts, right?
Yeah.
You can think of it a little bit like that.
The
But
Mongols had boats.
yeah, but but the truth of the matter is that these are Numenorians of almost as direct of descent as you are. So probably that's a little bit of propaganda slipping in, right? They're probably just as regal in their own right as you are, but they have their own practices, which and there is an element of savagery to their fleet that makes them seem more like pirates. But you should not.
But they would have cities down south. They would have cities and outposts and things down south, not like just camps raiding.
Exactly.
They're not Vikings.
No, they are not Vikings. They have a main city which is called Umbar. But they have other cities along the coast. They are well established down there. They are wealthy. They are not raiders, but in their skirmishes against you, they might, raid a coastline.
So I would imagine that my people, I think the factual kernel at the heart of pirate propaganda is that in more peaceful times, they probably just do skirmishes and raids up the coast, right? So, but I do think that you're telling me that my character would have a sense that there's like a growing menace in terms of how big their fleet is, how organized their fleet is, how difficult it would be to take the fleet on in a direct see conflict.
Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right. Now, luckily, it hasn't really turned to heavy conflict, warfare. Certainly not open war at this point. But yeah.
Is this still a time and a place where the elves of the Grey Havens are still coming down the coast to Gondor?
I mean, you probably have heard of that, maybe your father, but you have never seen a ship of the elves at this point.
Huh.
Okay. And then let's see here. So Andrew, as a lord, a warden lord of the Lords of Lasarnak, so you actually don't have a long trek to go to Minas Tirith, right? So if you think about the map of Gondor, and just in case you can't think of it, like the mountain range narrows to a point, and in that point on the east end is Minas Tirith. So Lasarnak is going to be just traveling south along the mountain range off that point. So right there, not too far away from Minas Tirith, is these orchards and fields, pasture lands of your people, protected from the east and from the south by Minas Tirith and the Rangers of Ecthelion. Your people haven't had a lot of threat, and you're protected along the coast by the ships of Belfla. So you are kind of a safe haven, and there's still plenty of people, citizens, that live in your area. So probably you are coming to this meeting not as someone with a lot of knowledge about what's going on down south, but as people move into the city, and especially as the Lords of Lasarnak send people, you're probably a representative of an enormous amount of people right now. So further west you go into Gondor, it becomes less people heavy, but your location is probably dense, and so you represent a sizable chunk of the Gondorian populace. Okay, so now that we kind of know why you're here, so let's share a couple of images with you guys real quick. So here is a quick image, nothing crazy, but here's a quick image of kind of my favorite image of like the throne room of Minas Tirith. You know, Peter Jackson likes like this very white, austere, clean thing, and maybe, but Minas Tirith at this point is also ages, generations into decay and ruin, and the fall of the kings of Gondor, and now the fall of the stewards. So, in my mind, it's a little less glorified. So here is where you're entering. That said, this is still the most impressive hall in the kingdom, and it's very noteworthy. I told you that you meet a couple of people there, so let's show you those. This is Ecthelion, the second steward of Gondor. Ecthelion is named after a High Lord of the Elves. He is a noble individual. Everyone respects Ecthelion, maybe not as much as they did his father Turgon, but Ecthelion has taken on a difficult task of manning an empire on the cusp of many wars, and he seems to be handling it very well. The people that he trusts are noteworthy and respected, and he also makes many committees like yourselves that make sure that the people have a voice. So Ecthelion is here in the room.
For the record, I googled Ecthelion. I'm like, let's see what this is. Nothing relevant. I was trying to figure out how on earth we were going to serve a first age. We were going to be servants of some first age elf as men of Gondor. I had no idea. Thank you, Lord of the Rings wiki.
He is his namesake, and it shows you how true to the Númenórean affinity for the elves that these names repeat. But the original Ecthelion is the Lord of the Fountain. He is the defender of Gondolin. He fights and defeats Gothmog. He dies fighting Gothmog, but he kills Gothmog.
I knew that because
you read the wiki, and you're like, this guy.
Read the wiki.
That doesn't seem... Well, you not only do you know it, but Zachariah knows it.
Oh yes.
Awesome. And so there's another person in this room with you guys. So it's Ecthelion, it's the four of you, and it is this younger individual named Theron Gill, who I will show you right now. So Theron Gill is an advisor to the king or to the steward. He's fresh from Rohan and dealing with crises there. So you all would know him, maybe not personally, but by his name, by his renown. He's a captain, much like yourselves, Ulysses. But you would expect him to be here at this point in time. Someone that's not here is Denethor, who you would have expected as the son of the king, but perhaps he's on a different committee elsewhere. And also there's rumors that him and Thorongil don't get along, so that might be part of it. So
that would explain a lot.
Yeah, right. So you're meeting in this room, and in the throne room, kind of off to the side, away from the steward's seat, a large map has been placed out, and there's candles burning on the map, providing light. There's food and drink that's been set out, but this hall has been cleared. There's not even any guards in here, right? It's just the six of you in this room poring over this map. Let's look at what this map looks like. I'm gonna zoom out here.
If I could make a quick suggestion, if we could take the candles and just set them farther, at least 3 to 6 inches from the edge of the map, never mind, sir. I understand. It's just the parchment over time. I've seen a lot of maps that are. Never mind. I'll just step back. Sorry.
Thorongil gives you a slight smile, and he does take the candles nearest him and moves them away from the maps, understanding that this is important, not just to you, but problem that's not a problem you want to deal with right now. So they lay out this map, and all of you are probably familiar with this, but probably Andrew, your character is the least familiar with this map. So they start looking over the map, and Ecthelion will place a finger on Umbar, and he will say something to the effect of, much has been said about our neighbors to the south of late. Many discussions, many theories.
Zach, we're not. I don't think we're on the page.
Oh,
I don't think you've moved.
My apologies.
The page.
Thank you
I'm
for that.
seeing it on the stream, but
nope, I've got you. Thank you. There you go. How about that? That help?
Yes, much better.
Okay, cool. So he says, much has been said, much has been debated. There's been many possibilities raised, and I've weighed not just the council of those present here, but even the council of the wizened wizards and others in my musings of how best to handle Umbar. And I know at times there's been talk of perhaps an alliance, and I won't rule that out completely, but I think we must recognize that the enemy has his hooks deep within the land to the south, and we should not suppose that we are walking into even neutral territory, or men with clear ears. It is almost certain that the enemy has burrowed deep, and that any attempt at camaraderie would be a foolish endeavor. That said, it is not without consideration, and it has been considered. He'll place his hand on Minas Tirith up here, and he'll say, I brought the 5 of you in, because I have determined that it will be you and a select force that will handle our neighbors to the south over the next coming weeks and months, while I turn my gaze to the east and to the greater threat that looms there. You will venture south. You will be my mouthpiece. You will be the mouthpiece of all of Gondor. You will be the sword of Gondor, should it be needed. He says, I know, and he wouldn't call you Ulysses, of course, because we haven't determined character names yet, but he would look at you, Ulysses, and he would say, I know, Captain, that your people are ready, willing to provide aid with their ships, and a direct route almost certainly would be to sail to Umbar. That certainly is the most efficient route. However, I will say that though I may have need of ships, I have a different task in mind for you. I would ask that you would take yourself, this messenger from Ecthelion, this warden from Lasarnak, and my scholarly friend here. Take your companions here and take the overland route to Umbar and see.
Stuart, my apologies for interrupting and things, but
Yes.
I understand. I understand that I'm only here because my father is ill, and that you'd normally be the one. Or I just wanted to make sure that you actually wanted that you weren't in error. That you actually wanted me to accompany the group. Since again, I'm against nepotism, and I know that this is an important thing, and that you'd normally send my father, but I'm not so much skilled at things, and so I just thought he sent me the maps and the books and things, and I'm very fluent. I'm happy to give advice and things, but I imagine you probably want someone else.
My friend, it is true that if your father was in good health, and if his age had not unfortunately caught up with him as fast as it has, I would certainly
the same rate as everyone else, as it turns out.
I would certainly be sending him on this journey as someone who knows the lands and the people. He would be an invaluable resource. And I will say that I have my own fears and misgivings about sending a young academic such as yourself on a trek such as this. That
I'm
said,
happy to bow out. I understand, sir, and I just wanted to tender my resume. Thank you very much.
My young
much
friend,
appreciate it.
my young friend, you will not be bowing out. For as much as your understanding may be much more limited than that of your father, your own understanding will almost certainly be sufficient, and I have it on good standing that your father has loaned you many of his books and many of the records of this place, and those you may take with you as an additional resource. You are going to a place where, and he gestures to your other companions, he says, these strong, capable individuals will hopefully be unneeded in their strength of arms. My sincerest hope is that you are able to find a peaceful way of negotiating. And if that is the case, if the primary objective is to be achieved, it requires someone with an understanding and an ability to reference, such as yourself. These lords and their steel will not be of use in those situations.
I understand, and I'd be happy to speak with you further about that before we leave. But if need be, then I'm happy to anything, my liege, Grace, Lord, got you covered.
He nods and he says, your objective is to travel the overland route, reach Umbar. Now, I have spoken through messengers, and we have been guaranteed safe passage for all of you there. But he gives a small smile and he says, safe passage could be interpreted in many ways, and even if the Corsairs themselves do not threaten you, there are certainly others upon the roads and wilderness of that land that will. So, as you will travel to Umbar, where we have their word, again, we do not know how well their word they will honor, but we have their word that they will hear your bargain. They will hear you out, and they are willing to negotiate for, if not an alliance, at least a truce, should the conditions be right, should the terms be right. He pauses for a moment, considering his words, that he says, that said, I have every belief that this is a ruse at best, and a foolish, hopeless endeavor at almost certain. And he turns to Thorongil and he says, thus I have tasked Thorongil with a separate quest, but one that will be tied in with yours as well. He says, Thorongil, I have given him leave to take a portion of our fleet to sail it far out into the bay and beyond into the Western Sea, and by a wide loop to eventually push up close to the bay of Umbar and to the haven there. And should your task fail, which I assume that it will, I am not sending you on a task expecting success. So should it fail, while their eyes are turned to you and to the inland roads, Thorongil here will lead a fleet to burn what of their ships they may and set them back hopefully years, if not decades, in their threat against our shores.
My steward, so I understand clearly, you would like me to lead this fellowship to Umbar, enter negotiation for either an alliance against Sauron and the darkness growing in the east, or at least a truce, a détente, that we and Umbar have a non-aggression pact between us.
Captain, we need a resolution to the threat in the south immediately. And yes, you have it right. And the third arm of that resolution is our friend Thorongil here. So one way or another,
Yes.
by the next season,
and
this will be resolved.
and my steward, I, like you, feel that the prospect of a negotiated settlement is dim. And I would expect Thorongil and his fleet to come into effect. But when they do, the four of us will be in Umbar, and things will get quite complicated. And what is your instruction to us at that point in time? Are we to try to fight our way out, or are we try to sabotage something within the city itself?
Thorongil interjects himself here and he says, I will not leave you in that city. Should it come to war, should it come to a battle, whatever you do upon the port, whatever chaos you sow, whatever you manage, know that I will bring a ship to that shore, and I will find you, and I will draw you out. You will not be abandoned there, and you will not, if you are unsuccessful in your negotiations, you will not be making the long trek back through enemy lands. You will be sailing with me directly to Belfless. The steward nods and he says, I would have it no other way, and I know that as much as Thorongil here, my young friend is keen to ensure your security and your safe exit. I do not take lightly that I am putting you in the midst of a hornet's nest, and then, with almost certainty, Thorongil here will kick it. It will be a very dangerous endeavor, and thus I am sending not just a representative, and he looks at the scholar, and not just a messenger, but I'm sending a unit that I believe has the hope of best chance of either negotiation or escape. You will be on a time limit. All that said, once Thorongil has sailed, which will be after your departure, and will be under the cover of darkness, and will not sail in any way near Umbar for some time, but at some point he will turn his ship south. And I would expect you all to have some sort of a signal, and he to share that signal to whether your endeavor is a success or a failure, because as he comes close enough to where he can see the shores of Umbar on the horizon, there must be a way for you to communicate whether he is to engage or to return home. Also, I leave the exact path of your overland travel in your hands, as I am not myself making this trek with you. I see no reason for me to have an say in how best you take your route. So, my only advice and my only directive is that you do not take the sea or the coastal route to Umbar, but that you stay inland at least some distance. Whether you take the road or you take the wilds, whether you avoid towns and strongholds, or whether you make this some sort of a grander, more elaborate tour is up to you. But I ask that you take the inland road, and other than that, it's your choice.
And when we are to reach them, do we negotiate with your voice?
You do.
Do you have limits by which we should negotiate? Are there things you wish us not to give? And would you prefer, if things break down, that we use the threat of violence? And if so, will you back it up to war beyond just our friends' raid? Is it all in our hands?
He nods and he says, some conditions, though you do speak with my voice. You are not to release hold of any of Gondor's lands, nor our friends to the north. Umbar and their allies must keep to the lands that they have already carved out for themselves. No more. He says, nor will Gondor be paying any treaty to the lands to the south. Whether you can negotiate a treaty from them or a land acquisition on their end, that comes up to your prowess in negotiations. But Gondor will not be relinquishing its wealth or its territory. As far as the alliance, assuming that both of those things are met, limited travel through our lands might be arranged, but I will leave it up to you and your companions to determine if they are trustworthy enough to use that as a bargaining chip. But perhaps they can make use of the roads through Ecthelion, if nothing more, or perhaps they can sail up the Anduin. These are options that I am not opposed to, should you determine them to be trustworthy enough for an alliance. But again, and alas, I do not expect that to be the case. My best hope for you, my truest and best hope, with any real chance of success, is a truce. And a truce should be something that you angle for one way or another. It would be nice to not have to fight a war on multiple fronts.
Well, I'm torn because my character is obviously young and doesn't feel up to this task, but would very much like to say something to the effect of, well, if you are setting us up for failure with almost no chance of success and already sending in a party to clean up the mess, then then sure, why not? What's the worst that can happen?
He says,
is what he's thinking.
Yeah. And maybe
he's not saying that he is glaring in that direction.
Yeah.
Young Zachariah, you can rest assured, I will keep your safety intact. The benefit of the four of us going into the heart of Umbar and negotiating in their palaces is that we will be able to observe and take note of what's going on there. We will be able to read the countenance of the people, the gesture, the sincerity. We will have insight, and that reconnaissance and that intelligence will be very helpful in us assessing the true strength of our southern enemy.
He says, you have read this true. There is another aspect to this that I would encourage you all to take part in. You are our best chance at a true, deeper understanding of the forces set against us or potentially set against us in the south. And while Thorongil and his fleet and your fleet, in emotions to the captain, have certainly seen the strength of the Corsairs on the sea, we know little of the forces they might have amassed deeper into the continent. So any information that you can gain there. And to my friend, and he turns back to the scholar, he says, to my friend, I know that this seems to be a hopeless endeavor, but I will say this, I would not send you there if I did not have some inkling of hope. And I do have a small amount of hope in your success. And if that hope should be proven true, how many lives will you have saved? Countless. It's worth the risk of sending a small party, even if that chance is so small. The risk, and he looks at Thorongil. He says, as good of a leader as good of a captain as Thorongil is, he will certainly lose dozens, if not hundreds, of men in the fight in the bay, and we will lose many, many, many more in the skirmishes and war that will come later. And while I cannot drag this out into an extended negotiation or extended back and forth light hostility, and we must put an end to it directly so that we may deal with the East, as much as I need this to have a resolution now, it would be wrong of me to not try the route of friendship first.
Well, avoiding and the loss of all these Gondorian lives and gaining an ally is worth nearly anything to you, correct?
Indeed.
Very well.
So what seems to be an impossible task is one that must certainly not fail. Sounds like fun. When do we start?
Right now. So we're gonna wrap it up here in just a moment, but I wanted to kind of draw your attention to this map, pulling away a little bit, because we're gonna start next session with you guys getting to plan your route and taking that route, right?
Love it.
So, couple things as you're looking at this map, and I'm gonna leave this map up for you guys in Roll20 throughout the week. This map is super important to you, and the colors on it are super important to you because in 5e, Middle Earth 5e, your route and which hexes you traverse through determine what sorts of encounters and how easy those encounters are throughout your journey. So you're going to start up here in Minas Tirith in this yellow square right here that's kind of a mixed matched jumble.
Yeah.
You got to get down here to Umbar. Now, green squares are borderlands, and you're going to have improved chances at success on your journey if you are on a borderland hex. Likewise, roads are going to make your journey faster. So if you take a road, you're going to move more hexes at one time. Depending on if you have a ship or a boat or a canoe or whatever, rivers can be the same. Yellow squares are called wildlands, and they can be dangerous, but they are also not thoroughly inhabited and like brimming with enemies. So yellow is going to be something that's like Aragorn taking them through the wilds after Bree, right? Not pleasant, but not dangerous in the same level as reds. Reds are called dark lands, and you don't have to remember these names, but reds basically are, if you're in these hexes, the threat of an encounter increases. So you'll notice that the road is going to be faster to some extent to travel some of the distance, but it's also more perilous because you're bound to meet other travelers. And while you have some promise of neutrality from the Corsairs, there's other people down here, right? So choosing the road will get you there somewhat faster for a little bit, but it's also going to come with its challenges. Last but not least, we have the black terrain and the black outline. So black terrain is like the mountains up here. You don't really have to contend with black terrain, but that's typically impassable, and you wouldn't be able to navigate that. You have to go around it, or it's going to be very, very, very difficult. But the black outlines are not only dark lands, but perilous, which adds another level of difficulty. So if you're in red, you have some threat. Black means, holy crap, you're going to be dealing with stuff, right? So
Cool.
as you plot your route, consider that the most direct route might be the best one, or navigating through that. There's also 2 cities that you guys could think about, or 3 cities on your way south there. We're not going to get into all this. You certainly aren't going to travel there tonight. But you have Pelargir right here. Pelargir is kind of the, it is the port city of Gondor up the Anduin. And it is still in Gondor's control. So Pelargir isn't as great as it once was, but it's still this massive port city. So that's definitely quote unquote safe for you for right now. And then you don't know much about these, but you know that there is a stronghold that kind of watches over the beginnings of Umbar and Silent. That stronghold is called Silentir. It used to be a Númenorian stronghold. It is certainly not a Númenorian stronghold now. This is kind of like the opposite end of the South Gondor from Pelargir. Silentir was long abandoned by Gondor several generations ago. You don't have any claim to it. You would assume that the Corsairs have ownership of it, but you don't know that for a fact. And then Harmindon is another tower attached to a town on the southern end of South Gondor. You don't know much about this town, but what you have heard, and we can roll dice to see if you know more than this later. What you have heard is that this is kind of a rough border town. So it's not owned by any one people, but many different peoples from Harad and Umbar traverse through that city, and even people that still reside in the South Gondor, Gondorians of your people that live in isolated farms or small cities or small towns, still traverse through Harmindon. So you've got some options of paths and all that, and some choices to be made there.
And we were told that we can't take it took me ages to figure out that west on the map is water.
Yes.
Because it's not blue or anything. So So we were told we can't take a boat down there, but can we take a canoe or something down the Anduin? Is
Yeah.
that allowed, or is it, he wants us to stay away from the coast, or just the river as well?
So you could take the rivers. He's asking you to basically keep away from specifically the coastline here.
Okay.
And his main goal there is that, eyes look towards the east, from Umbar look towards the north and east, as opposed to the south or west. So,
Okay, sounds good.
Well,
I
sweet.
I look forward to working with you guys and figuring this out.
This is gonna be fun.
cool. Any questions about anything else before we wrap up here?
I think I'm good.
No, I'm good.
One rules question: is combat 5e combat rules?
It's pretty much 5e combat rules. Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, I think the book
Great.
says we would have a section on combat here, but we follow general 5e combat rules, so just read those rules. So it's straight up 5e
Yeah.
combat.
Oh,
Based
Love it.
sorry. On the note of questions, is it regular, like point buy for abilities?
That's a great question. Let's look up here. Let's find that out.
I was flipping through the book and I couldn't find it. But
Yeah.
probably just because I couldn't find it.
No, let's find out here real quick here.
I am going. When you find out, would you just text it to me? I'm gonna take my dog out, so I'm just gonna call it here for me.
Yeah.
But just let me know when you find that out. And I figured out my craft and virtues and stuff like that so far. So
Perfect. Let's just say it is not listed in here, Andrew. So we'll just say that it's going to be like standard. So you could either do the standard point buy or the standard array from regular D&D and go nuts. I'll leave it up to
Perfect.
you guys because I don't see anything in here. Good call. Thanks a lot, Zach.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm good.
Cool. So we're going to
Next game.
playing again on the 21st. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes, that should be. Yes, that'll be fine.
That's
possible.
Thursday. So 2 weeks.
Let's see here, 2 entertainers, 3 hour. Oh, we're both entertained. That would be 9 o'clock,
9 o'clock your
Eastern,
time.
8
Yeah.
o'clock. Okay. So it's right, 8 o'clock your time, 9 o'clock my time.
That's right.
Yeah, I will. It should work. I may be a few minutes late, but I think I should be good. We're tearing. What I'm tearing down.
Okay.
Greenery wall, Garland. Yeah, it should work, but it'll be a tight squeeze for me.
No problem. Well, if we need to push it back by 15, 20, 30 minutes, that's fine too.
Totally
We'll
cool.
deal with it once we get there. I think that's going to do it. Thank you
Fantastic.
guys for playing. Thanks,
Yeah.
chat, for watching and for commenting and being excited. That made me happy. So we'll